Friday. Bright spells, showers, mid-20s at their highest.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Tonight on Farage, we'll be broadcasting from the Red Zone, but I still managed to make it to work. We will talk about the weather, of course we will, but at 8 o'clock, in 1 hour's time, we'll get the next round of results in the Conservative leadership election. We'll be here live for those results in what will be a 2-hour special. We'll talk about a new piece of polling on social attitudes in this country, showing how disconnected London is from the north and many other areas. And Sue Hodge, Mimi from Hello, will join me on Talking Pints. That and much more after we get the news headlines from Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. The top stories tonight. Flights at Luton Airport near London have been suspended due to the heat, causing a problem with a certain section of the runway. The airport's authority says workers are trying to repair it, and this comes as red extreme heat warnings have been issued for millions of people across the UK. Kew Gardens in West London seeing the hottest day of the year so far, reaching 37.5 degrees Celsius. The heatwave has also closed schools for the next 2 days and added pressure on the NHS. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says contingency plans, though, are in place.
Across the NHS, extreme heat plans have been published each May, the last one just a couple of months ago. So local trusts manage the pressures themselves. We're coordinating that across the ambulances. Additional resources have been put in place to surge more capacity to call handlers to support over the weekend and into this week. And we're closely monitoring the situation, and Cobra was an opportunity to look at those pressures across the system, just as we did at the weekend.
Well, in Parliament today, Boris Johnson has been strongly defending his government ahead of a confidence vote in the House later tonight. The Prime Minister signed off as leader by listing what he felt had been his successes, including his record on Brexit, the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and he reminded the House of his strong general election victory in 2019.
Mr. Speaker, this government has fought some of the hardest yards in modern political history. We've had to take some of the bleakest decisions since the war, and I believe that we got the big calls right.
Well, back to the heat wave, and the dangerous summer heat has police issuing fresh warnings. after discovering the body of a 13-year-old boy in Northumberland. Robert Hattersley died after swimming near the River Tyne yesterday. His family said he brought a smile to so many people's faces. And that follows the death of 2 other teens and a 50-year-old man near rivers in other parts of the country earlier this week. So the field of candidates in the race to replace Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be whittled down today. Tory MPs are voting right now in the 3rd round of the contest. It's happening until 7 o'clock this evening, with results expected at 8. The candidate will be the one with the fewest votes, and that will be the one that will be eliminated. European bison have been introduced into woods in Kent, where their ancestors apparently used to roam. It's hoped they'll restore the woods and make them more resilient to climate change, with the bison's natural behaviour of grazing, felling trees, eating bark and even taking dust baths. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Farage.
Well, I'm pleased to be back after my week away, a week on the Kent coast, beautiful weather. I had a wonderful time. And I'm back, of course, to the Red Zone in London. Isn't it amazing that I managed to make it to work? But I have to say, coming up through South London today, it reminded me of the pandemic. It reminded me of lockdown. Virtually nobody on the streets, very few cars on the road, parks deserted. I even saw a clip of Camber Sands Beach in East Sussex, which over the weekend had tens of thousands of people on it, and there was no one there because the government's scare programme has worked. And we're living in this age when the state wants to make all the big decisions for us. Personal responsibility is out of the window. Yes, I know it's hot, but it's a dry heat. And provided you wear a cap, use sunscreen, drink water, my view, people should be out enjoying the beautiful weather. I'll be joined by a meteorologist this evening who no doubt will disagree with me very strongly. But of course, the main point of tonight's talk and debate is I want to ask you, of these remaining Conservative candidates, who would you vote for? And I have to say, I thought Suella Braverman last week said some bright things, but it was obvious she wouldn't get very far. The one candidate prepared to say we should leave the ECHR. It's the only way we can get back control of our borders. And since then, I have to say, Kemi Badenoch has really set this alight by actually being prepared to stand up and say she doesn't want our kids at school and university poisoned with critical race theory, being told that everything about this country and its past is something to be ashamed of. But I very much doubt she will make the last 2. And I very much doubt now that Penny Mordaunt is going to make the last 2 because she's been exposed as somebody who frankly isn't telling the truth. And hey, we just got rid of a Prime Minister because he couldn't tell the truth. So it's probably going to be Truss against Sunak. It's probably going to be the great globalist, the man who has family links and interests to businesses in China, who is happy to work hand in glove with all the big banks, who's helped raise our taxes to the highest in 70 years, against somebody who, and I can't blame her for going on the C&D marches. After all, she was a kid and her parents were hard left activists. But as an adult, she was a Liberal Democrat activist. She spoke at the Lib Dem conference. She wanted then at least to abolish the monarchy. She voted Remain. She voted 3 times for Mrs May's dreadful deal. And yet suddenly the ERG and prominent Eurosceptics think she's the one. My guess right now is that she will get through to the last 2 and she will win. I think the Conservative Party are making a dreadful mistake. I think it's Theresa May 2.0. Yes, she was a Remainer, but it'll be okay. It won't be okay, and I don't believe she can connect with the red wall. Well, Darren McCaffrey, it's been a busy day in Westminster. Before we get to the vote and the results, and you'll be here with me live at 8 o'clock for those results in this 2-hour special. But before all of that, Boris Johnson has been having a bit more fun today, hasn't he?
Indeed. If you like your politics to be entertaining, it's been quite an entertaining day in Parliament. Actually, enormously good fun in the sense that there's been this vote of confidence. Very strange in that Labour wanted to push it last week. The government said no, and then, lo and behold, the government decided to hold a vote of confidence in itself, which is pretty unusual. also a bit ridiculous in the sense it's not going to go anywhere. Conservative MPs are not going to vote for a general election. I'm not even entirely convinced the Labour Party want a general election. They're certainly not prepared for one, but it's the theatre of politics. And we saw a very bullish Prime Minister today talking clearly about his record within government, trying to defend the actions around the pandemic and his support for Kyiv. I think at one stage he said he was more popular in the streets of Kyiv than he was on the streets of Kensington, which is probably true. And also clearly getting Brexit done, as he would claim. And he took interventions from Jeremy Corbyn. He was clearly having quite a lot of fun. Was really, really interesting. In saying that, there was that sense of kind of, as you find with these things, the kind of, he was enjoying himself, but the authority draining almost minute by minute, with MPs knowing in that place across the water that in the end of the day, his days are now numbered.
A bit like Margaret Thatcher in 1990, perhaps at her most relaxed in the House of Commons in her last ever speech.
But she say, I'm enjoying this,
yes,
I'm enjoying this. And
there
was that sense with Boris today. Interestingly, with the person sat next to Boris Johnson, of course, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. I mean, talking about trying to send the most deliberate signal possible, she has repeatedly said throughout the weekend in those TV debates that she's been the one that's been loyal to Boris Johnson. She didn't resign. Though it must be noted, she didn't hold her hand up yesterday when asked whether the Prime Minister would serve in her future cabinet. But yes, she is essentially the tacit agreement of Downing Street in this leadership contest, undoubtedly. And Keir Starmer was quite punchy and bold again today. I guess it's a pretty easy game of cricket in some ways for Keir Starmer on these occasions, repeatedly challenging all those Conservative MPs who were cheering on the Prime Minister, saying that only a matter of weeks ago you were writing letters.
Days ago.
Calling for him to go because you frankly couldn't trust him. So it was great politics, it was great theatre, it was great parliamentary theatre, but ultimately at the end of the day, when the vote comes at 10 p.m. tonight, don't expect any great surprises.
No, absolutely. On to the more serious business of the day. Of course, Conservative MPs voting. One person will get knocked out today, and that process will go through perhaps until Wednesday, when we're left with the last two. Tonight's TV debate cancelled. The TV debates were odd, though, really, weren't they? Because there are three electorates here, aren't there? You've got Conservative MPs who picked the last two, Conservative Party members, about 160,000, who pick who the Prime Minister will be and party leader from those two. And then the broader general public. I got the feeling with those debates, people were watching it thinking, but hang on,
why have I not got a say?
I mean, I'm not sure it sort of helped politics very much.
No, and it is interesting. I think this will be the first Prime Minister who's been elected solely by those 160,000 Conservative members. Really fascinating to a large degree in terms of, you're right, the different kind of electorates involved in all of this. And the public don't have a say, but their public opinion has weighed heavily in all of this. Let's look at tonight, though. We're going to get the results in less than an hour's time, so Graham Brady's going to announce it. Tom Tugendhat is almost certainly knocked out. He effectively admitted that this afternoon. He'll probably fall below the 30 threshold, but he will finish last. I think the really interesting thing is to look at where Suella Braverman's votes go to.
27 of those.
27. Will they break primarily for Liz Truss? If they do, I agree with you. I think she'll almost certainly end up in the final two. If they don't, if they fracture a bit more, if some of them, quite a few of them, maybe go to Badenoch, is there a possible path for her to get into the final two? I wouldn't rule it out. Unlikely, but I wouldn't rule it out. And third of all, are we now seeing, or have we seen peak penny? As in, did Morden's kind of momentum kind of fizzle out at the end of last week?
She didn't tell the truth. She's been caught out not telling the truth on trans rights and where she stood. Isn't that the case?
Well, I mean, there's clearly been evidence from the civil service over the weekend that completely disputes what she says. Now, her camp denies all of this, but frankly, she's in a very sticky position. Though there has been a concerted campaign to undermine Penny Morden from her opponents, and it has been relatively effective.
And vicious in the press.
It's been vicious and it's been effective. So I think the interesting thing is, has she stalled? Will the campaign stall? So I think the kind of the key thing here is Rishi will probably remain in three figures. Among MPs, he is clearly the most popular. It's that battle for second place, if you like, that really is absolutely fascinating. And that's the thing to really look out for tonight. And then we'll move into tomorrow and that kind of fourth round. And Tugendhat's obviously...
And maybe by then deals start being done.
Possible. I mean, there was an awful lot of pressure, wasn't there, from Lord Frost to try and get Badenoch to drop out at the end of last week to all unite behind Liz Truss. That clearly has not happened. And I think for the Conservative Party, and this was expressed, wasn't it, today with the cancellation of that Sky News debate tomorrow night, is that this is not a pretty show in many ways. This is showing real deep divisions, not just on policy but also on personality too. many people saying the real winner actually thus far of this Conservative leadership candidates kind of contest has been Keir Starmer rather than anyone within the Conservative Party.
Darren, I'll see you in about 45 minutes' time. Thank you very much indeed. Now, some of the issues that have been raised during these debates have been around social issues, around, some people call it culture wars. I don't think of it like that. I just think so much of the debate that we have in SW1, so much of what you see on the other news channels is frankly from a different world to where most people are. Whether it comes to trans rights, whether it comes to looking back at British history. And by the way, I wouldn't just say SW1 because many of our universities are responsible for spreading this poison, but it is a minority poison. Well, somebody who's done, I think, a very interesting piece of work on this is Professor Matt Goodwin, Director of the Centre for UK Prosperity at the Legatum Institute and, of course, Professor of Politics at Canterbury University. Welcome. Matthew, you've asked some questions in polling over this weekend, questions that nobody ever asks. Explain.
Well, one of my frustrations with how we talk about the country is we often talk about it from a very London perspective, and we tend to think that many of the things that we talk about among the chattering classes are the things that animate most people, and actually that's really not the case. So I looked at a number of policy positions over the last week that have been associated with one of the leadership candidates, Penny Mordaunt, and I just asked people, how do you really feel about these? So to give you one example, I asked them, do you think that we should refer to pregnant women as pregnant persons, which is a very fashionable thing to say among some quarters, and I found that actually only 5% of the country think we should do that. Most people actually do not want to view that issue in that particular way. And on a whole host of other issues I'm sure we'll talk about, I found much the same. This really strong disconnect on these cultural questions. And to echo you, I think, I don't call these issues culture war issues, because when you talk about women's rights and when you talk about freedom of speech, when you talk about how we teach our children in schools and universities, that's not a culture war. Those are issues that most people in the country want to talk about.
How has Westminster become so disconnected then?
I think partly it's about the way in which our institutions have become very skewed towards university graduates, and we know that if you look at politics, if you look at media, if you look at the creative industries, cultural institutions, they do lean very heavily towards people with university degrees, often from Oxbridge, Russell Group institutions, and we know that those people tend to be much more liberal, socially liberal, typically, than other voters. And we also know that over the last 5 years, a section of that group has become a little bit more radical than we might expect. So so-called radical progressives, or woke is the word that many people use. And on issues around history, the idea that we should just, look at British history as being a bad thing, a source of embarrassment.
You asked the question on the empire, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, we asked the question, we said, do you think that the British Empire is mainly a legacy of destruction, has mainly left a legacy of destruction, which is often the argument you hear in many of the newspapers and so on. Actually, only a minority of people really think that. Only about 23% of people really share that view. And we also asked about television programmes in the past. We asked about, how do you feel about Dad's Army, which of course Penny Mordaunt in her book has said essentially these are a source of shame, that they're sort of casually racist and oppressive.
She's a conservative, is she?
Also associated those programmes with ideas like white privilege and things like that. And we said to people, well, do you think these programmes are a source of embarrassment? And only 20% said they felt that way. For many people, of course, these big television programmes, Dad's Army, Ain't Half Hot Mum, it's part of their collective memory. It's part of how they think about their British identity, and it's also something that brings us together. Of course, people tend to forget we used to only have 4 television channels. Millions of people would sit around watching these programmes. And so to simply say, well, this is the past and we want to erase it and forget about it like it doesn't matter to us anymore, actually, a lot of people don't feel that way. And you can see from the charts I've put on Twitter today, only a minority of people really view Britain through this lens.
And when we get to the Red Wall, of course, these views are stronger, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at red wall voters, they are more culturally conservative. They're more traditionalist, typically, especially working class voters, people that, you know, have worked from the age of 16, have gone through vocational programs, technical training and so on. And they tend to want to talk about immigration, want to talk about free speech, you know, they want to talk about really issues that matter to them and might not matter to, you know, Islington and, you know, North London. So that disconnect, of course, is why Labour came unstuck with those voters. I don't need to tell your viewers that one of the big stories here is about a Labour Party that became really culturally disconnected from a large number of people. But now I bet you that they're looking at these Conservative leadership candidates.
Well,
and they're probably thinking the same.
Isn't this the point? I mean, Kemi Badenoch has dared to talk about these issues that you're talking about, but is extremely unlikely to get through to the last two. When it comes to Sunak, when it comes to Morden, and when it comes to Liz Truss, I mean, they're not going to talk about any of these things, are they?
Well, as you say, I mean, I think Kemi has talked about some of them, but she's not got that profile. She's not, some would say, hasn't got that experience. But of course, you know, maybe we don't want experience in the sort of Westminster sense. But at the same time, I think if you look at Liz Truss, if you look at Rishi Sunak, the sort of front runners, I think there is a strand of conservative thought that views these issues as below them. That says, actually, this culture stuff, it's not very respectable, it's not sort of establishment politics. But for many people out there, they do want to talk about what's happening in schools. They do want to talk about what's happening in media, in creative industries. They want to talk about why the films we produce, the television programmes we produce, the adverts they see on television, the way in which we talk about the country and we talk about our history don't actually reflect the country that they know and they love. So my message really to these leadership candidates is we need to get more voices into these institutions. We need to diversify these institutions, and we need to make clear that, you know, the sort of 20-odd% that dominate in the country, that dominate these institutions, are going to have to start to make room for other people who have other beliefs, other backgrounds. And I think that's ultimately the only way we're going to get through this era of polarisation that we're seeing in America and Britain and elsewhere.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Matthew, thank you very much indeed. Well, what a different take that was on diversity. I rather like that. And you know, when you rubbish everything about this country's past, whether it's the empire, whether it's what we did in 2 world wars, whether it's the TV programmes that our parents and grandparents watched and enjoyed, and we perhaps, when we were young, watched and enjoyed, what you're really saying is that actually you're ashamed of those that went before you. That's actually what these messages are. And you know what? We're not. We're rather proud of those that went before. They were just different times and occasionally with different tastes. Now, talking of the Red Wall, I was going to go 2 weeks ago to Redcar. I didn't go because we thought a Boris Johnson resignation was imminent, which indeed it was. I will be in Redcar this Thursday with Farage at Large with a live audience. If you want to come along, please go to the GB News website. I'll be back with you in a couple of moments.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory. twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
I asked you, who would you vote for if you were a Conservative Member of Parliament and had a chance tonight and over the course of the next couple of days? Your responses. Jack says, voted for Boris and still would. Jack, I think there is an element of buyer's remorse going on within the House of Commons at the moment. All I can say is he wasted the most fantastic opportunity. What a pity he couldn't just simply tell the truth. And whilst he did get some big things right, it was the little things that he got wrong too many times. John says this Tory leadership contest should be about what PM can win the next general election, which seems to be overlooked. John, I don't think Tory MPs are overlooking that for one moment. One viewer says, you'd be an excellent PM, Nigel, but it would have to be Kemi. Yeah, well, they wouldn't let me into the contest, would they? We don't have open primaries. We're not America. We're not a free, open democracy. No, it's a club. And finally, for now, Matthew says, remarkable honesty, a common sense vision, no bluster, even though she's only been a minister in one role. My Conservative Party member vote goes to Ms. Badenoch. Well, Matthew, I can tell you I do know that the Conservative Association of Orpington met over the weekend with a very big turnout, and 49% of those said they'd vote for Badenoch, and only 2% said they'd vote for Sunak. Now, let's talk about the weather, shall we? Because it's everywhere. The warnings are absolutely everywhere. As I mentioned earlier, I drove in through South London. It was like the first lockdown. Nobody on the streets, very few cars on the road, people not even out in the parks. And it seemed to me that whilst it's hot, it's a dry heat. It's not an unpleasant heat. Indeed, I worked in these temperatures when I went to Strasbourg every single July, and life seemed to carry on as normal. Quite why in a country that obsesses about climate change we have tarmac melting at Luton Airport is quite beyond me. It doesn't do that in the Middle East or elsewhere. So my view on it, common sense view on it, is I'm sick to death of being told it's going to snow, stay at home. There's an Atlantic storm coming, please stay at home. There is a risk to life, and now with this heat wave. And whilst I accept it's exceptional, aren't we slightly overdoing it? Well, joining me is Professor Liz Bentley, a British meteorologist and Chief Executive of the Royal Meteorological Society. Liz, good evening. Welcome to the programme. I know these are exceptional temperatures, but isn't the hysteria, isn't the fear that's being spread by government and by meteorologists, isn't it just a little bit over the top?
So I don't think so, because it is exceptional heat for us here in the UK. So temperatures today reached 38.1. That's very close to our all-time record of 38.7 recorded 3 years ago. And tomorrow we're going to go even higher. So temperatures forecast to be over 40 degrees tomorrow. We haven't seen temperatures like that in the UK. And as you said earlier, we haven't got the infrastructure here in the UK to deal with those temperatures. You know, average temperatures this time of year should be about 23, 24 degrees. And our infrastructure really just can't cope once those temperatures creep into mid to high 30s.
No, I mean, that is, of course, a source of embarrassment. As I say, you know, going just a few hours away to Strasbourg, I don't remember roads melting or trains not running or, you know, when these are very, very normal temperatures. And OK, we're not perhaps equipped to cope. But when it comes to saying to people, stay at home, you know, even for fit, healthy people, these are dangerous temperatures. Liz, I mean, my view is, and I repeat the point, it's a dry heat. humidity feels quite low in the air. And provided you're sensible, use sunscreen, wear a hat, drink some water, shouldn't people actually be outgoing for a few hours a day to enjoy this exceptional weather?
Well, we do have, I mean, the science does show that if the temperature gets above about 27 degrees, then the mortality rate increases, not just in this country, but elsewhere as well. And I think it's just been sensible, hence the warnings that were in place, the red warning from the Met Office because of exceptionally, unprecedented temperatures. As I say, we're likely to see records being broken tomorrow. And then the heat health warning as well, because when we get to those temperatures to mid to high 30s, our bodies really struggle, not just with the daytime temperature, but nighttime temperature tonight. It's going to be an awfully sticky night tonight. Temperatures not getting below 22 degrees in places. We don't have air conditioning units here as they do on the continent, so we're really going to struggle tonight. The body will not be able to rest and recuperate before we go into another hot day, and that really puts stress on the vulnerable, the elderly, but even the fit and well people, hence these warnings in place.
No, I get it. Hot temperatures at night, no aircon, not much fun. Liz, a final thought. A story out over the weekend about a solar flare possibly affecting communication systems in Ireland. I've watched other news channels where commentators, not even scientists, commentators have been telling us that this, of course, is all an inevitable part of climate change caused by mankind. Could it be that things like the sun do have an influence on temperature too?
Well, the sun obviously drives our energy system, so it's there for us every day. But actually, if you look at the trend of solar variation, solar flares over the last 100 years or so, there's nothing there to show that they've led to the increased global temperatures that we've seen. The only evidence that we really have that shows that global temperatures have risen by the amount they have is the greenhouse gas emissions that we as humans have put in the atmosphere. It really is down to human climate change.
OK, Professor Bentley, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. And by the way, I'm not trying to present to any of you that I'm a meteorologist, but I do just mention that there has been this solar flare threat over the last few days. The late, great Sir Patrick Moore, well known for The Sky at Night and many other things. And I asked him a few years ago about climate change. He said, look, Nigel, it's impossible to believe with the numbers of us living on the planet, we are not having some impact on the environment. But he said to me, I think what the sun does and sunspot activity is likely to be even more important. Now, one thing I noticed today were shots of train stations and, of course, people being told only travel if it's essential. It's another excuse to work from home. I've no doubt Whitehall behind me is absolutely delighted. Well, Amanda Lennon is an HR consultant and employment lawyer. Is working from home now almost becoming a right?
It's not a right, not yet.
No, but are we moving in that direction?
I think employees are now in a stronger position to negotiate working from home on a more permanent basis, and COVID has driven that really, because previously a lot of employers operated 5 day a week in the office, and almost you had to prove why you should be able to work from home. Now COVID has taught us that people can be productive working from home, and so employers are now having to look at hybrid working policies.
Well, is that because they're scared of their employees, perhaps? I mean, the productivity argument, I mean, come on, Amanda, the truth of it is, you work from home and the doorbell rings because it's the Amazon delivery, or the neighbour's got music on loud, or it's, perhaps hotter at home where you haven't got air conditioning compared to an office where maybe you do have air conditioning. I just don't buy this productivity argument. Is there any sensible research that's been done on this?
Well, I'm a case in point. I work predominantly from home. I'm a working mum with 3 children. I work much longer hours at home than I ever did in an office.
Well, with all those distractions, I'm not surprised.
But answering the door takes a few seconds.
Well, what about having 3 kids around the place? How do you work with 3 kids around the place?
They're at school or they're in childcare, so it doesn't affect my job. That's not to say there might not be instances where people are using it as an opportunity to do other things, but I think on the whole, I don't know of any research as such yet, but certainly in my situation, I'm able to work from home successfully. And I think employers are, you hear this phrase, the war on talent. Employers are now having to look at how they can keep the right people that they want to for their business. And this is an example of where employees are now able to say, I'd love to do this job, but I need more flexibility, and that includes working from home to an extent.
There may be jobs like being a computer programmer, you know, where you work on your own, and maybe you've got a set of headphones on, and you've got a specific task to do, and you don't need social interaction to do it. But in most things in life, great new ideas happen because we're with each other. We bounce ideas off each other. In fact, certainly in my working life, perhaps I'm the exception, sometimes even better ideas come on a Thursday night after work when you go out for a social drink, and someone says, wow, that's a great idea. And for young people, I mean, work from home surely is catastrophic for ambitious young people who physically need to be with others to learn.
I would agree with you on that. I think the younger people who are starting out in their careers need more interaction face-to-face than people who've maybe developed their careers and know how to build relationships, not necessarily face-to-face. So I spend a lot of time on Zoom calls having to build those relationships. You have to work extra hard in order to do that. But for the people starting out in their careers, they really benefit from face-to-face interaction, and I see that in workplaces that I go and work at.
If I'm a foreign investor and I'm thinking about investing in the UK, and the pound's quite cheap, so it's a good time. If I've got dollars or some other currencies, it's quite a good time to invest in the UK. Am I going to look at the growth of this work from home culture as being a positive or a negative in terms of putting my money in?
I think from a property perspective, perhaps it's a negative because there are lots of empty buildings now all around. I think personally from a productivity perspective, there is still a lot of opportunity. People are working harder when they're working from home, at least in my experience. And the fact that we now have a mix of working models, and it's not just rigid, you must come to the office 5 days a week, I think can only be good for morale and engagement and that discretionary effort that's so key in getting people to stay working for their employer.
Well, Amanda Lennon, you put a very convincing case. You haven't yet convinced me,
Okay,
but you put a convincing... That's because I'm old school. And I think people should turn up for work on time, dress properly, and I have an old-fashioned view of it. And I think that's more productive, but it depends. I accept what job you do. A couple of thoughts about today, a couple of what the Farage is about today. Trans rights have been much talked about in this Conservative leadership debate. Of course, it's dogged horribly Penny Mordaunt's campaign. Little story from New Jersey in the USA, where a transgender prisoner in a prison in New Jersey has now managed to get not one, but two fellow female inmates pregnant. When talking about this issue, the transgender prisoner, said, "I don't know what it's like to live as a man, and I refuse to ever revert back to such habits or behaviour." I would have thought in this instance that perhaps ought to be questioned, but there we are. And finally in this section, what the Farage. Prince Harry has been to the United Nations today. Goodness only knows why they invite him. But he's been speaking, he's been laying into the decision by the Supreme Court in the USA to make abortion rights something decided at state level and by voters, as opposed to it being part of federal law. And he's also talked about the attack on democracy in the world, which I think he and his wife mean any candidate they don't like and support is anti-democratic. But just to cap the lot, to an empty room at the UN, I'm pleased to say, Prince Harry has been talking about poverty in Africa. A man who's never actually had to do a day's work in his life, who travels around the world in a private jet, who's got a big advance from Netflix, and he is now a czar on poverty in Africa. Isn't that just marvellous? In a moment, we will get back to the issue of British culture. I'm going to be joined by an actress who's done many, many things in her career, but she's incredibly well known to you at home as Mimi from Hello, Hello. I'll be asking her, is she ashamed of that programme?
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, big drama is about to take place in Westminster in exactly 20 minutes' time. But there is a moment, I think, to reflect on what Professor Matthew Goodwin was talking about just half an hour ago. This attitude survey, this showing that all this, we think all these old comedy programmes are dreadful and disgraceful and the past is awful, is not something the general public support. Before I introduce my Talking Pints guest, here is a clip of her in action in one of those comedy shows.
That is the one that fancies me.
Who is to blame him? You have a quality that is irresistible.
You too?
From the moment I saw you, my lips hungered for your lips.
Well, practice on this. I am rather busy.
Boss, that was Mimi LeBlanc, better known in the real world as Sue Hodge. Welcome to Talking Pints, Sue. Great to see you.
Oh, Nigel, you nutty boy. Cheers.
Oh, it's still there. I'm gonna blush in a moment.
Ooh.
Amazing. I mean, hello. It was when it first came on the televisions, and I watched it. I loved it. And you kind of came into it a few years in. It was this new injection.
This pocket dynamo.
Yeah, absolutely. But it led to even more complications in Renee's life, didn't it?
Well, she was sort of, fearless, wasn't she? A bit like me, really. Short and to the point.
You've done lots of things in British comedy.
I have indeed. I mean, I started, I was only 14 when I started with the Dick Emery show, and my first pantomime was with dear old Charles Hawtrey.
The Carry On.
The Carry On.
Yes, and a very, very particular British sense of humour, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the Carry On films, I mean, they're all classics, aren't they? I know they get a bit of a ribbing now, but... well, what doesn't? We get to a stage where we're a little bit frightened to do or say anything, aren't we?
Well, and it's very interesting that you're here today, and you saw this polling that Professor Goodwin produced earlier.
Yeah.
And that asked specifically about Dad's Army and Elaine Half Hot Mum, because they were the two programmes mentioned in Penny Morden's book. But it equally could have been Hello. Now, I'll tell you this, I was in 2015, as the general election approached, asked what British comedy shows I liked, and Hello was on my list. I love it because it takes the mickey out of absolutely everybody without fear or favour.
I know.
And I was really, really laughed at by, you know, the establishment here. It just showed that
I mean, the French were randy, the Germans were kinky, the English were stupid, weren't they? I mean, who could possibly take offence at when the Germans had to speak English sometimes, and all they went was far, cup of tea. You know, I mean, oh crumbs, it was tongue in cheek.
So you're not ashamed of being in the lower low?
Ashamed. I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of it. And it appears that Channel 5's not ashamed of it. We've just made a documentary. It's not out yet, but it will be out later this year. So I've got a whole new fan base. I've got young children, you know, now, the next generation around, and it's still shown 95 countries worldwide.
When you've had a career, as you've had from a young age, long career, is it a good thing or a bad thing that you become so well known for that one role?
Well, I mean, it does limit you after that. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I will never, ever be thought of as anybody but Mimi LeBlanc. Yeah. I mean, you know, but I've done so much work because of it as well. I've done so much charitable work, you know, been involved with Jubilee, veterans. I'm going off to the Isle of Wight in a couple of weeks, and I'm opening a veterans hub over there. So it's, and I love all that. You know, the people who... That's the reason we're still here, because they fought the wars they did. You know, so I'm very proud to actually be part of where I can go and give something back. I mean, the fabulous public here gave us so much support with the programme.
You were loved, weren't you? The cast was loved.
We were loved. We still are.
Yeah.
And we still are. And the ones to the left, bless them, there's a few of us, and we're still very, very good friends. And we, as I say, we do lots of conventions. We raise a lot of money.
And yet the BBC wouldn't commission that today, would they?
They would not. They would not. But they can't. They couldn't possibly do that now. I mean, it's a shame, but I tell you what, it's never going to go away.
Can we reverse all this political correctness, do you think?
No, I don't think we can.
No?
No, I think it's gone too far now. But all we can do is hang on to the memories that we have, and that's still memorable now. I mean, I've written a book. I was asked to write the book, so I did. It's still going on. My life is still very much a low alone. There ain't a lot of goodbye there.
Well, I'm pleased to hear it. And you've managed, you live in Lincoln these days.
I do.
And we were up in Lincoln the other week, but you were away and we missed you.
Yep.
But, I mean, how is it? I don't understand. I'm really, really confused, Sue. I mean, you must have seen you've come to the red zone today.
Yep.
There's a risk to life out there on London streets. I mean, how on earth did you get here?
Because I've got a brain, and I can say, well, look, the trains won't be running, this one. So if I want to do Nigel Farage's show, which I do, I'm going to go down the night before, and I don't care where I stay, but I'm going to be on that show because I want to.
So you don't like being told what to do by government?
No, never have. And I don't like the scaremongering and all that silly nonsense. I've been listening to your programme earlier, and I mean, for goodness sake, yes, it's hot. I know it's hot, but I'm not completely dumb. I know, thank you for the drink. I know I've got to drink lots.
well, I think they may be water, but I don't know. Yeah, but this is a nanny state, isn't it, Sue?
I'm afraid it is. I mean, I come from a background of my mother. When I'd say to her, I'm cold, and she'd go, here you go, there's a sweater, put that on. That's how we were brought up.
And Essex was where you grew up, yeah?
And Essex was where I grew up, yeah. My father died when I was 15. My mother brought me up virtually single-handed. It wasn't easy, but hey, we came through all right.
And why acting? Why comedy? What has it pushed you into all that?
It's what I've always wanted to do. A lovely actor, Jimmy, actually said to me, Sue, he said, I worked with him, and he said, your forte is going to be comedy, I can see that. And I said to Mummy, you know, this is what I wanted to do. And she said, well, it's not going to be easy, Suze, you know, with no daddy and etc., etc. She said, but if it's what you really want, I will support you 150. But I tell you now, don't you muck this up. It ain't a rehearsal. She said, because there's not going to be any going back if this is your choice.
Yeah, this is the one lesson that we learn from all. I've been doing this now for a year. From the Talking Pints guests that come in from all different walks of life, you know, many of whom have had difficult starts, overcome adversity, and the one big lesson from Talking Pints is follow your dreams. If there's something you want to do in life, you need to do in life, get out there and do it.
The world is your oyster. Go and get it.
Yeah. Now, tell me about this book, please.
Well, this book, I mean, it's actually, I actually wrote this book a couple of years back now, and I self-published it, but I got a lovely Austin Macaulay contract that just came out. So this book, they are on sale now, but this one is not. This is for you, Nigel.
Ah, to Nigel. Thank you for having me on my show. Oh, Sue, there we are. There it is. This book is out there. It can be purchased. Mimi's Memoirs. Hello, hello. A magnificent picture on the front of the cast. And this book's for sale, and a foreword by Richard E. Grant, which is rather nice.
My old friend Richard, bless his heart.
That's rather nice. And you're also still touring and travelling and doing things.
Yes, I'm still out with Best of British Comedy with Jeff Holland, with my producer Chris Gidney later in the year. I'm directing Chris Gidney's Panto. I'll be at Haverhill. I'm starring in that. And I have to just say, in case we suddenly get cut off, Nigel, when Mimi heard that I was giving you that book, she said, well, I want to give him something as well. So Mimi gave me this. She said, be careful because it's still wet. But actually, it looks a bit limp and droopy to me. But I don't know why she wanted me to give you this wet celery. But
well, hopefully we could do better than that. Well, but the wet celery did feature in Hello, Hello, did it not? With one of the German officers.
Well, I thought you might know about it. I personally don't.
And a flying helmet would be needed as well, wouldn't it?
And possibly an egg whisk if you have.
I don't know whether we get short notice to manage with the egg whisk. And when you worked on this, and clearly you're still living it, as you say, and you're going to live it for a long, long time to come, there were some pretty good other characters in that, weren't there?
They were. I mean, this was amazing. David Croft and Jeremy Lloyd, I mean, they just had... it was in the casting. They cast the most odd components, and somehow when you put all those components together, they would just seem to fit. I mean, Gordon Kay and Carmen Silvera. I mean, I come from a sort of Shakespearean background, repertory theatre, so I was used to having a leading man and leading lady, and that's what they stood for to me. And then we were all these cogs, and every cog was valid. I mean, you know, the brilliant Arthur Bostrom with, you know, Crabtree, and Guy Siner. I mean, that character of Lieutenant Gruber, he was so superb. And of course, I've got my best friend, she's still my bestie, Victoire, Vicky Michelle.
Yes, who I've met before, lovely, delightful lady.
She's gorgeous, gorgeous. We're praying for her sister at the moment, who's not too well. And Herr Flick and Helga, I mean,
magnificent.
Magnificent.
Well, you may be Sue Hodge, but you're Mimi LeBlanc to me, and thank you for joining me on Talking Pints. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
We have got time for a couple of Barrage to Farage questions. You have sent these in. I have not seen them as yet. One viewer asks, we are constantly seeing comedy shows cancelled or changed to include trigger warnings. Are we killing comedy and artistic freedom in this country? I think Sue is rather better placed to answer that question than me. Are we killing innovation? Are we killing...
Well, we seem to be trying to. I mean, we're trying our best and our utmost to, you know, to keep it going. I mean, you know, Ricky Gervais and people like that. I mean, he's amazing. He just tells you the way...
He's doing well.
I know.
So I think there's a fight back begun.
Come on then,
so,
ready?
You're the one for it, absolutely.
I'm up for it.
Absolutely. Mick asks, do you think that the laws are applied evenly and fairly to everyone in the UK? Mick, the laws have never been applied evenly and fairly to everyone in the UK. But I can tell you one thing, through our judicial system that we've had evolving here since Magna Carta, yes, going back all that way, even though things aren't perfect here, they're a damn sight better than in most other countries in the world, and that is still the truth. John asks, how have you made the most of the lovely weather? Look at me. I've been outside 18 hours a day. First week off last week for the whole of this year. I did 6 months straight through on this programme, not missing a day. I was on the Kent coast. It was magnificent. I was out catching mackerel, barbecuing, drinking British beer, spending time with my children. What could be better? And when the weather's good here, there is absolutely nowhere better at all. I've got time, I think, for one more. Another viewer asks, do you think any of the contenders are better than Boris Johnson? In debate, they would all have wiped the floor. Boris would have wiped the floor with all of them in that debate last night, there's no question. He had a massive majority. He was able to pick up, and he sort of inherited the work that had been done by many Brexiteers over many, many years. He had a magnificent opportunity, but he wasn't able to tell the truth. And it's a personal sadness for him. It's actually a bit of a tragedy for the Conservative Party, because I think they're on course to lose the next election. So please, please tell your kids and grandkids, if you get caught doing things that are wrong, don't hide, don't lie, just put your hands up, ask for forgiveness, and in a small C Christian country, you will be forgiven and you can continue. And Boris, sadly, at Eton, didn't learn that lesson. Now, having talked so much about it, let's have a look at the weather forecast for tomorrow.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's been a very hot start to the week, and it's going to get even hotter. Tuesday marks the peak of this extremely hot spell. Red warning in force because these temperatures are unprecedented, record-breaking for the UK. And we're simply not adapted to this kind of heat, both by day and by night. The hot air extending across the whole of the country, which means that overnight temperatures won't dip very far at all. Even though there'll be clear spells for many, there'll be a few showers for the northwest of Scotland, some patchy cloud elsewhere, but otherwise clear skies and temperatures in some spots holding up in the mid-20s. And if that happens, it will be the warmest night on record. So we start off Tuesday already with temperatures in the 20s, and quite quickly with widespread sunny skies, those temperatures will shoot up. I think in some places by 10 a.m. we'll already be in the mid-30s of Celsius, and it's only going to get hotter. The heat intensifying across southeast Scotland into northeast England, central and eastern England, with temperatures widely here 38 to 40, perhaps 41 Celsius. Exceptionally high, unheard of temperatures. It is going to be cooler towards the southwest compared with Monday, and Northern Ireland also seeing lower temperatures. The air is starting to cool down. We're going to see that big change on Tuesday night as an area of showers moves through, and then those showers clearing the east for the start of Wednesday. Clear spells overnight, some wet weather pushing into western areas by the end of the night. But a more comfortable night for sleeping, although it won't be especially fresh. We're still looking at lows widely of 18 or 19 Celsius. A fine start for many on Wednesday, certainly a cooler start compared to recent mornings. Some showers around in the west first thing. Those will push east. And actually, it is another hot day in the east of England. Lincolnshire, East Anglia, 30 Celsius still possible. That could spark a few showers or thunderstorms by the afternoon. More typical weather for the UK on Thursday and Friday. Bright spells, showers, mid-20s at their highest.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady, is due to give the results of this round of voting amongst Conservative MPs at 8 o'clock. And my guess is, I'm joined by Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, my guess is, Sir Graham being who he is, it will be 8 o'clock on the button.
It will be punctual. He has not let us down to date.
He's a class act, isn't he?
He is in many ways, and I know he gets criticised a lot about the fact that he keeps everything to his chest and, you know, plays on the fact that he's always the only one and he never reveals it to anyone about the number of letters that have gone in. But frankly, he's sustained quite a long period of time. It's great theatre, and he's sustained his position despite challenges actually for years and years and years. Yeah. So he's clearly doing something right. He is widely respected within the Conservative Party. But crucial, yes, we're going to get this third round results in the next couple of minutes. Of course, what we need to look out for is who's going to get knocked out primarily. Now, we all think be a massive shock if it's not Tom Tugendhat. I think it'll be a massive shock to him, given the fact that earlier today...
But he hasn't had a bad campaign.
He's not had a bad campaign. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, what did he want? He wanted to raise his profile. Has he done that? Undoubtedly, he took part in 2 national television debates. He's had a campaign that has, frankly, got him out into every TV studio and radio studio in this city. So, yes, he has definitely raised his profile to the point where you could seriously see him now actually ended up in the cabinet in some form or another if he wanted. But he is almost certainly going to go out tonight. And the other big question, so that's a kind of given, I think. The big question is, where do Suella Braverman's 27 MPs, after she dropped out last Thursday, where do they go to?
And it would seem, I mean, you know, Mark Francois, you know, sent out a letter saying all ERG members should be supporting Liz Truss, which I looked at with incredulity. Yeah. But Lord Frost is backing Liz Truss.
Indeed, yeah, and she has captured the right. Now, whatever you think about Liz Truss' personality and her character and her maybe lack of charisma, she is putting forward a policy agenda for the Conservative Party on tax and on the economy that clearly a lot of Conservatives have been very frustrated with Boris Johnson about for the last 2 years. And there is that attempt, clearly, if you want to see tax cuts within the Conservative Party or within the government in the months to come, she is your woman, if you like, and Rishi Sunak very much is not your man. So that's why she will do well. So I think we need to look at where those votes go to, but also where is Penny Mordaunt? Has Penny stalled, essentially? Has her campaign come to a grinding halt? Or is she still maintaining a pretty strong lead against Liz Truss? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, let's be honest about this again, it looks like this is a battle for second place in relation to Rishi Sunak.
Yes.
We expect him to be
358 eligible voters. I mean, Boris Johnson won't vote, and one or two others.
Yeah. I think we've had 1 or 2 abstentions in the recent ones. You're right, the Prime Minister is obviously not weighing in to all of this. And well, we say that. I think behind the scenes, Downing Street very much are, and they've made it clear that Liz Truss is the person they want to go.
OK, we're going to Graham Brady. It's 8 o'clock on the button, as we expected.
357 votes were cast out of a possible total of 358. I'll again read the name of the candidates and the number of votes cast in alphabetical order. Badenoch, 58. Mordaunt, 82. Sunak, 115. Truss, 71. Tugendhat, 31. So Tom Tugendhat is eliminated from the election. The other candidates are able to go forward to a 4th ballot, which will take place tomorrow between 1 and 3 p.m, with the result announced at 4 p.m. you very much. Oh, sorry, 12 till 2 tomorrow. 12 till 2.
OK, well, they're the results. So Tom Tugendhat, as predicted, is out. Not huge other shifts of votes. We'll give you a full analysis of all of this. But first, let's go to Polly and get the news headlines.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed. Well, the latest news stories away from politics today, and flights leaving Luton Airport near London are back on after the heat caused problems with the runway at some point this afternoon. The airports had temporarily suspended arrivals and departures as workers attempted to make a repair to the tarmac. And that comes as red extreme heat warnings were issued for millions of people across the UK. Parts of Suffolk saw the hottest day of the year so far, reaching 38.1 degrees. The heatwave has also closed schools today for some parts of the country for the next 2 days. And it's added pressure on the NHS. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says contingency plans are in place.
Across the NHS, extreme heat plans have been published each May, the last one just a couple of months ago. So local trusts manage the pressures themselves. We're coordinating that across the ambulances. Additional resources have been put in place to surge more capacity to call handlers to support over the weekend and into this week. And we're closely monitoring the situation, and Cobra was an opportunity to look at those pressures across the system, just as we did at the weekend.
Well, those sweltering temperatures that we've been talking about aren't just a problem here in the UK. They're a problem across Europe as well, where firefighters are battling blazes right across the continent. The hot and dry conditions are fueling wildfires right across Spain, France, Portugal and Greece. Thousands of firefighters are currently battling the blazes. In fact, experts are saying France is facing a heat apocalypse as more than 24,000 people search for emergency shelter. And the dangerous summer heat has police issuing fresh warnings after discovering the body of a 13-year-old boy in Northumberland. Robert Hattersley died after a day of swimming near the River Tyne yesterday. His family say he brought a smile to many people's faces. So back to politics now, and Boris Johnson has been strongly defending his government ahead of a confidence vote in Parliament later tonight. The Prime Minister signed off as leader by listing what he felt had been his successes, including his record on Brexit, the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and he reminded the House of his strong general election victory.
Mr. Speaker, this government has fought some of the hardest yards in modern political history. We've had to take some of the bleakest decisions since the war, and I believe that we got the big calls right.
But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, fought back this afternoon, saying the Prime Minister had been forced out in disgrace.
Britain deserves a fresh start with Labour. Free from those who got us stuck in the first place. Free from the chaotic Tory party. Free from those that propped up this Prime Minister for months and months. And here's the difference. Under my leadership, the Labour Party has changed. And we're ready to do the same for the country too.
Sir Keir Starmer this afternoon. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, and now it's back to Farage.
So the results are in. What does it all mean? Those 27 votes from Suella Braverman, they've been reallocated. They've, of course, been reallocated. But, of course, there are also shifts between candidates that would have taken place as well. 357 Conservative MPs voted. Every single Conservative MP, apart from Boris Johnson, voted, which is pretty high. Darren, give us the scores on the doors.
So, really fascinating. Rishi Sunak has done much better than I think anyone would have thought he'd done at this stage. He was already in triple figures. He is now at 115. He's added 14 MPs. He is within touching distance of that magic number of 120, which guarantees he's in the final two, unless people renege later on in the process. Seems pretty unlikely. So I think we can now say, unless something ridiculous happens, Rishi Sunak will be in the final two. Penny Mordaunt actually lost an MP, and it comes back to this point of, are we seeing her campaign stall?
So fewer candidates, but her vote is down slightly.
Our vote is down. So has Pete Penny happened? Was it actually last week? Liz Truss added 7, which actually, given the fact that Suella Braverman, the person whose MPs, if you like, were up for grabs, 27 of them, and that the ERG had backed her as well, adding 7 MPs is not that impressive, I would suggest. She is on 71. Kemi Badenoch, however, has added 9 MPs, so more. So what I'm trying to say, ultimately, in the end, is that battle for second place is, frankly, as wide open as it was before this ballot took place. I mean, it is still entirely possible that one of those 3 women will end up in the final 2. Really is. I mean,
one
incredibly unpredictable. So one of those 3 will end up.
Will
end up.
It's a question of which one, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. So Rishi Sunak will be very happy with that result tonight. Penny, I think our campaign will be slightly concerned that they've now stalled and are going somewhat backwards. But frankly, also, I think Liz Truss' team will be concerned they are not piling on the number of MPs they should do. And if we get to tomorrow, because the question is who's going to fall out tomorrow?
There's a long way to go, isn't there?
There's a long way to go. Let's say Badenoch does fall out.
But you would assume, and perhaps it's risky to assume anything in this game, but you would have thought Tugendhat supporters would be more inclined towards Rishi and Penny Mordaunt.
I would suggest that's the case, but frankly, you would have been inclined to say that Braverman's, the former the current Attorney General's votes would have gone to Liz Truss, and that's clearly not been the case tonight.
Well, it's going to be tough to read. It is tough to read. Lucky we got the head of PR at the Bookmakers Coral coming in later on the programme.
So, and we've got just remind you, I think Graham Brady did say we've got the 4th round of this vote tomorrow afternoon between 1 and 3. The result at 4 p.m.
Results at 4 p.m. tomorrow.
4 p.m. tomorrow.
And then we go through it all again.
On Wednesday, I think, again, it's late afternoon, we should get the final 2. If it is tied, it is possible tied for second place. If it's tied, they're going to have an immediate another ballot, another round.
It will be sort of penalty shootout style.
Almost, yeah. I mean, it's one of these strange things where this is incredibly important, but also, if you're a political nerd, let's be honest about this, incredibly exciting too. We've not seen a race in the Conservative leadership as open as this for quite a long time.
No. Darren, you're absolutely right. Fascinating. Thank you ever so much. Well, let's see how the respective camps are viewing tonight's results. I'm joined in just a moment by Richard Holden MP. He's the Conservative Member of Parliament for North West Durham. Of course, we're talking there very much red wall. And interestingly, for a red waller, he is supporting Rishi Sunak. And I would have thought that the Richard Holden, you and the Rishi camp, looking at these, I mean, there are no dramatic changes here, but it's been quite a good result for Sunak, hasn't it?
I think it's been a cracking result tonight. Genuinely, those Suella Braverman votes being redistributed. People were suspecting they'd go to Liz or to Kemi en masse, but it's clear that Rishi's actually the winner tonight, and I was within touching distance of that. And I think that comes down to a really good performance in the 2 debates over the weekend. I think people are also starting to think about that next Prime Minister, who they want to see, and what they're going to do for them. And I think Rishi's in a really good place at the moment.
I mean, he has one big advantage. He actually looks like he might be a Prime Minister. It was. I always felt this with David Cameron. Even though I disagree with almost everything he did, I fought against him pretty hard, as you well know. But I always thought when David Cameron walked down the steps of an aeroplane at a foreign capital somewhere, he actually looked like a PM should. And there's no question that Sunak can carry himself well. I don't doubt that for a minute. It's also quite interesting, Richard, that he can speak for 60 seconds without referring 3 or 4 times to which has been, quite frankly, some of that has been almost comedy gold from some of the other candidates. So I get all of that. But, you're representing a red wall seat, cost of living, those issues impacting families in your constituency far more than in many constituencies in Surrey or Cheshire or wherever else we can talk about. And just the thought that here's a guy who is incredibly rich, which we shouldn't hold against him, but he is incredibly rich, continued to hold a green card, which wasn't really very bright, whose wife has avoided paying millions in tax. You're going to struggle if he was to get through and become the next Prime Minister. Aren't you going to struggle on the doorsteps to put that across to your constituents?
Well, a couple of things on that, Nigel. I mean, Rishi came to my constituency quite recently, visited AA Flags in the run-up to the Platinum Jubilee, was there with the seamstresses, small business owner, easy-going nature, easily chat with the people, also understood, having had that family background in working in a small business himself. So I think there's no...
Well, he worked at Goldman Sachs.
Well, but he worked when he was younger at his family's small firm, you know, and then, like you, he went and there's nothing wrong, and people are aspirational in places like North Australia as well.
I'm not knocking success in any way at all, and don't think I am, but the point I'm making, the point I'm trying to make here, and fine, you go to a factory setting and do an event, and it's a relatively antiseptic environment. It's not quite the same as the working man's club, is it?
Well, I would also say you go into the working man's club and you listen to what people say. Listen to what people say about Rishi. During the pandemic, Rishi was the one who really stepped up with furlough for workers, and he also stepped up with grants and loans for lots of those small businesses, which wouldn't be there without that support. I think you could have also seen more recently during the Ukraine crisis, he's one who's been there putting out the packages there, mostly targeted at lower earners, but also, when he can, targeting tax cuts at lower paid people in work. So when I think of my area, he's raised the national insurance threshold, so anybody earning under £36,000 a year will be getting significantly more cash.
But a host of other taxes have gone up, Richard. And what about the self-employed?
I'm not doubting that, but when he has been able to cut taxes, where has he cut taxes? He's cut them on working people. He's also targeted that 5p tax cut on fuel. Now, that's fair enough to say, given the rising fuel prices, it's not enough. But when he has had spare cash, he's done that.
I mean, I keep hearing this. You know, I've heard it from Boris again and again and again, and I'm now getting it from you. You know, the tax burden's the highest it's been since Clement Attlee was Prime Minister. Let's not delude ourselves about any of this. For small businesses, for strivers, this guy's done nothing.
That's not true.
Apart from threaten them.
No, that's not true. I mean, he
literally threatened them during the pandemic.
No, first of all, he got grants, a lot of them, especially in the hospitality sector. Secondly, they got loans, basically interest-free loans, a huge amount of small businesses did. And thirdly...
No, anybody with a limited company working as a director was ineligible for loans.
But the businesses were not eligible for loans at all. They might get some relief. And also, he raised the threshold at which all businesses pay national insurance.
Even more important, short term, ultimately, your constituents and your voters are the ones that matter more than anything, and I get that and understand that. But, final thought on this. This electorate, you guys are going to put Rishi through to the last two. I can see that. Fine. Are the 160,000 Conservative Party members going to vote for a Chancellor who is seen to have put up taxes?
I think what they want is a Chancellor who's going to do the right long-term decisions for the country. The biggest concern I've had from my members, actually, is inflation over the last few weeks and the potential knock-on effect that has on interest rates. What people remember, my members, is they remember the early 90s when interest rates went through the roof and people lost their homes. What they want to see is somebody screwing down on inflation as quickly as possible, because if you give them tax cuts now, all you'll do is boost inflation, cause further problems down the line, and you get into a cycle. What they want to see is somebody who's got a proper long-term plan, deal with inflation now.
He's overseen a big rise of inflation without ever noticing it, ever spotting it coming.
Deal with inflation now, and then...
He never saw inflation coming, did he?
Nigel, I think we both know that the Russia's invasion of Ukraine
had nothing to do with it.
Had a huge amount.
Inflation was 7% before that invasion.
We all know that there's a lot of that was due because people could see what was about to happen. That's why the oil price was rising so significantly before then. Gas price quadrupled.
I don't agree with that. I think a lot of it's monetary inflation, but we'll agree to disagree on that. Richard Holden, ready for Rishi, MP for North West Durham. Thank you.
Thank you,
for joining me in the studio. Wow, there we are. There's some real passion in this campaign of that. There can be no doubt at all. Now, as Darren said, it was interesting that Liz Truss, who's got some big names coming in behind her. I thought the intervention of Lord Frost was particularly significant. I thought Suella Braverman, who was the most Eurosceptic of the candidates, of that there was no doubt at the early stage, I thought her rowing in behind Liz Truss was significant. And she's been sort of put up as being almost the standard bearer for the right of the Conservative Party, which, as I said earlier, for a former Lib Dem activist, not as a kid but as an adult, as somebody who was a Republican, somebody who voted for 3 times for Mrs May's deal and a Remainer, I found it all very, very odd. But I got to be honest with you, I thought Liz Truss would do better in this vote today, and yet I can see that Kemi Badenoch on some of these cultural issues has made quite a big impression. Well, joining me is a cheerleader for Liz Truss, Marcus Fish, Conservative Member of Parliament for Yeovil.
Hi.
Good evening. Wasn't a great result, was it, for your
Well, no, she's made progress. Against Penny Mordaunt went nowhere. And actually, Liz has done well. We are closing in on that.
In relative
that
terms,
is the important race.
Yeah, in relative terms, Penny Mordaunt's down 1, Liz Truss is up 7. I kind of get that. What I'm saying is, given the high-level backing that Liz Truss has had from a few people, and given the high profile she had in last night's debate. Now, you can argue whether she did well or badly, but
I think she did well.
But she was well. I say we can argue about that, but it was high profile. The clash with Sunak, the accusing him basically of being a posh boy who went to a private school, him hitting back. I mean, that was the moment, in a sense, of that debate last night. Given all of that, you know, Kemi Badenoch's vote has gone up more than Liz Truss's. That's the point I'm making.
Well, only a couple. Look, it's
no. Let's just do the numbers. Her vote's up by 9.
Look, there are all sorts of games that get played in these elections. I think it's slightly suspicious that Rishi's vote's suddenly gone up by that much. It makes you think there might be forces at work playing games with these numbers to try to game things the way they come through. The point is that Liz is in position now. She's the best candidate for us to coalesce around. She's the one who'll take no nonsense from the civil service and actually get Brexit done properly and take advantage of all the opportunities.
Rather like Mrs May.
No, not like Mrs May.
Hang on,
no,
Marcus,
not at all.
Who told us Brexit means Brexit as a Remainer.
You will know
why
well
is
that
Liz
I
Truss
fought very hard against Theresa May.
I know that.
And I know that. Liz Truss.
Why do you?
Because
has she had this Damascene conversion?
She is the only candidate that's going to get it done. All of the others will be run by the civil service and will cave to them. She's the only one. The Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is her baby. She absolutely believes in low taxes and regulatory reform, getting people excited about investing in the UK, working in the UK.
Let's accept that.
And that's how we actually deliver opportunities for people throughout the country.
Let me accept that.
Yeah.
Because time is what it is, and move on. I mean, her performance in that first debate was wooden, disconnected, and even in last night's debate, she's incapable of speaking to camera without reading notes. I mean, she certainly couldn't do this job without a full autocue. I mean, how on earth? And you know as well as I do that we're kind of in almost presidential politics in this country. Most votes that are cast in general elections are cast for or against the party leaders. It is a sort of quasi-presidential system. She's such a bad performer. Even if you're right about the civil service, she's terrible.
I know Liz well. She's actually a very humorous, mischievous, charismatic person, and I'd like to see her get into people's front rooms, get people feeling like they kind of know her, because the Liz Truss that I know is a brilliant performer, and she's determined as hell.
Why wasn't she in these debates?
Well, I thought she did very well last night. She
did better.
She's the only one who's actually proposing a program that's going to work.
Marcus,
and at the end of the day, delivery of things that matter to people is at the end of the day how we win this next election. We do not win it by making a mess of Brexit again. And I honestly think that all the other candidates would.
Did Boris Johnson fail to complete Brexit properly?
Well, there's unfinished business. The situation in Northern Ireland clearly is unfinished business, and that's incredibly important to both communities there in Northern Ireland that is sorted out. And Liz is the one who is going to push it through. Liz is the one who is arguing for it in the cabinet. Rishi Sunak was obstructing that. Rishi Sunak was obstructing the retained EU law bill. Rishi Sunak is not going to do
But Rishi Sunak,
Brexit
like Liz Truss, now apparently is this great reformer of EU law.
No. Rishi really is not the great reformer of EU law. Liz is 100%.
How do we know who to believe?
Well, because just watch what they've done in the cabinet over the last 6 or 9 months.
What about
one person's been arguing for it, one's been arguing against it.
What about the cross-channel trade?
Yeah.
Liz Truss shows absolutely no willingness to confront the point about the ECHR and our inability to control our borders. No willingness whatsoever.
That isn't true. We actually spent an hour with each of the candidates earlier this week and went through all of these issues. Liz Truss was easily the most impressive of all of our interviewees.
I'm talking about ECHR.
And the ECHR, she was very, very, very clear on. She will absolutely address the issues with the ECHR that are making sure that at the moment we have this issue with the small boats. She's 100% on.
Will she leave the ECHR?
Well, that's whether you actually leave the whole thing. She's willing to.
Like the old Tory argument about the EU. We don't need to leave, Nigel. We don't need to leave the EU.
That's what she said. She said she's willing to do it. But if we can do things surgically in legislation to deal with the issues, it's worth examining that.
Well, you know, if I heard her say in public, if I heard her say in public, you know, that leaving ECHR was on the table, I might slightly change my mind.
She's as strong as any of the candidates on dealing with the small boats.
I think that may be a bit of wishful thinking, but Marcus, finally, is she going to come through this? Is she going to come to the last two?
Yeah, I think she will. She's in a good position. Anyone who is thinking sensibly about how we actually get these things done, get the UK in a good state, more than a good state, get people really excited, as I said, about the prospects for the UK. She's the one with the plan, and she's the one with the so-and-sos to go and deliver.
All right. Well, Marcus Fish, MP, Conservative MP for Yeovil, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Pleasure.
And there's a lot of passion in this campaign. But what an amazing election, isn't it? When you have 3 electorates. You've got these guys and girls who'll vote for the last 2. 160,000 Conservative Party members who'll choose the next Prime Minister, and then you, who will decide at the next general election whether that is the person that you want. Well, it is an extraordinary and confusing contest. In a moment, I'll be joined by the head of PR for the bookmakers Coral. Let's see. Let's try and find out, where's the smart money going? Maybe that's where the clue will be.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Well, we heard some very impassioned members of Parliament there, one backing Rishi Sunak, one, of course, backing Liz Truss, and they were very, very passionate. I asked you the question earlier, who would you vote for? Paul says, I'm afraid I wouldn't vote for any of them that are left. I voted for Boris to lead this country until 2024 at the earliest. Maureen says, I want the last two to be Liz and Kemi. These two are the most real and level-headed. The others are just too slick, like salesmen in your face. Well, Rishi's certainly very slick. But that may not be a bad thing, who knows? Philip says, so far, the only person I see as a future PM is Kemi Badenoch. Yes, Philip, she's impressive in policy particularly, but without much experience. That, I think, is going to be a problem, although I must say she's done well in this round of voting today. Phil says, in my humble opinion, the party will rue the day when they let a bunch of disloyal egotists push Boris out. I'm a card-carrying Conservative and will be voting for none of them. Yeah, well, I have to say, I'm not particularly inspired by any of them. I do think that what Badenoch is talking about, what Badenoch is proposing, is really important. And I must say, that polling Professor Matthew Goodwin brought into us earlier on today was so refreshing, because it shows you, actually, it is much of mainstream media, many of the opinions that come out of central London that are completely out of touch with real, ordinary, decent people in this country. They just very rarely get the opportunity to express themselves. Now, it's confusing. And before I introduce David Stevens, who is head of PR at the bookmakers Corals, David, I've got to give you a slight confession before we kick off, which is that I have already got this contest completely and utterly wrong. Yes, a couple of months ago, I thought it was pretty obvious that we'd finish up with Nadhim Zahawi challenging very strongly for the leadership of the Conservative Party. I thought Zahawi would come through. And then, of course, we saw all sorts of stories, allegations, none of them proven, about money. He's out of the race. So, David Stevens, I've already had a bet. It was on Zahawi. I've done my conkers, so I can't make any predictions of any kind at all. And looking at this pattern of voting tonight, it's not an easy one. Tell me, where's the hot money? Where's the big money? Where's the smart money going in this contest at the moment?
Good evening, Nigel. First of all, on behalf of bookmakers, and you don't have to disclose who you place your bet with, but a big thank you for your losing bet. They're always appreciated. If it's any consolation, you are not the only person to have got this leadership race wrong so far. And you've used the word a couple of times, confused. Well, the betting is as confused, or as lively, if you want to use another word. Let's go back to the beginning. When Boris announced he was stepping down, the two early frontrunners, according to the betting, were Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. Now, no surprise there, you might think. However, historically, that's not what you want to be. You don't want to be amongst the early favourites in this contest, aside from Boris Johnson last time around. And historically, that looked as if it was going to be the case once again, because last week it was all about Penny Mordaunt. She was winning polls, she was getting glowing reviews, and she was backed all the way in to odds-on favouritism. At that point, it was one of those the bookmakers were thinking, well, you know, we're going to get stung here. We're going to be paying out on the Portsmouth MP. Over the weekend, just began to obviously slow down. Signs that all wasn't great in her camp. Over the weekend, Rishi Sunak regained favouritism. He's now odds-on favourite this afternoon, or this evening, I should say, 10 to 11 favourite, the former Chancellor. Liz Truss has re-emerged as his closest rival in the betting at 9 to 4, and the Portsmouth MP, Penny Mordaunt, out to 9 to 2. Kemi Badenoch in there at 14 to 1. So we're as confused as you are, Nigel. if there's one thing I can say, I think we probably all agree on, Rishi Sunak is going to be taking his place in that final two. He's 50-1 on, 1-50 to do so. But who will he face? Well, the semi-final, to use a sporting comparison, looks between Miss Liz Truss at 4-7, 7-4 on, and Penny Mordaunt 5-4 to make the final two. So we heard from Darren earlier saying he's loving it as a politics follower. Political punters are loving it, but I'm going to make one safe prediction. It's a pretty short price. There are more twists and turns to come in this leadership race.
Well, absolutely. And I remember in 2005 when David Davis and David Cameron were the last two, and they both went out and addressed party conference. And at that moment in time, bookmakers had stopped taking money on David Davis, so worried were they about the amount to which they were going to get stung. Cameron gives one speech, the whole thing turns around, and he wins. So yeah, as you say, who's to know how this may turn? Another thought, final thought on all of this when it comes to betting. How big a market is political betting?
I mean, it's a really big market for those that follow it. And that may sound a funny thing to say, but we always think that betting actually tells one of the most accurate predictions, particularly when it comes to big national votes, because people are asked something by a polling company. They might not quite tell the truth. They might play their cards close to the chest. If you're having a bet, like yourself, Nigel, you put your money on Nadeem Zadawi because you thought that was what was going to happen. So we always think that the betting is a really accurate guide. But as I say, on this particular occasion, there'll be a lot of Penny Mordaunt backers out there hoping she can make the sort of impact again. She needs to do it again for her backers. As I say, she was odds-on favourite. She's now 8-9-2. But you're absolutely right. David Davis was a red-hot favourite. He had his feet in number 10, according to the betting. So, Rishi Sunak, you're not there just yet.
Absolutely, it is. Political betting is wildly unpredictable, but you know what? I can just say this to you, David, as a bookmaker. I'm still doing okay as a result of Brexit and Trump. I'm just gently giving a little bit back to you boys, but I'm hoping it won't last too long. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing that with us this evening. Well, there you go. It's a wild ride. It's difficult to predict. I still think, personally, Liz Truss will come through against Rishi Sunak. But what do I know? I've lost money on Nadeem Zahawi. In a moment, we'll be joined by Angela Knight, former CEO of Energy UK, because one of the areas that has not been talked about enough is energy and net zero. The same is true of immigration and the English Channel. I'll be joined by David Maddox, the editor of The Express Online, for that. So we'll deal with those subjects that haven't had quite as much of an airing as they deserve to.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
What we do know is that thus far, the two debates that we've had, and there won't be any more, but those two debates that we saw on our screens, dominated by tax. Dominated by these arguments, Rishi Sunak saying, I've acted responsibly, I looked after the country, and taxes can only come down when we're ready to do it. And if you cut taxes now, it will be inflationary. And indeed, we saw Richard Holden, MP for North West Durham, a few moments ago, repeating that argument. Then you got Liz Truss saying there's a recession coming. You've caused it by putting up taxes. And I was the one in Cabinet that stood there and stood up and fought it. So it's been a lot of debate around tax. A lot of debate around personality, and quite right too, because the reason we're having this contest isn't so much on policy. Even though I disagreed with Boris Johnson strongly on some things, I also gave him credit for the things that he did get right. And he did get some big things right. Actually backing Brexit and at least getting some sort of deal over the line was right. But some things in these debates have been virtually, completely and utterly ignored. They've simply not been talked about, and all of which makes me think that perhaps, just perhaps, the Conservative Party will pick a leader who's got no really firm views on two very, very major issues, and perhaps that's going to leave them very exposed to the electorate. Well, one of them is energy. And there's been a bit of talk on cost of living, but almost no talk on energy. And Angela Knight, of course, former Conservative Member of Parliament, former Economic Secretary of the Treasury, former boss of Energy UK. And Angela, first things first, you've seen a few of these contests over the years. I mean, are we dealing with these MPs with the most fickle electorate in the world?
Oh, well, that's what they said, and it always feels like it. And right now, of course, the discussion that they are having, that is, the candidates are having, although it is portrayed to all of us, you know, through television or whatever, it's actually, that discussion is a discussion for which they're trying to influence 300 or so votes, you see. So that is why there's this disconnect right now between what it is that they're talking about and what it is that the country wants them to talk about. But they're going to have to get on to that second part soon, whoever they are, actually.
Because, I've been looking for they for years and years. What do you think about the calibre of the candidates? I mean, I heard Liam Fox yesterday saying how the debate had shown how spoilt the Conservative Party was for talent. And I thought, well, Liam, I've agreed with many of the things you've said over the years, but not that. I mean, this is not very impressive, is it?
It's not doing very well, actually, for the party, I think. You know, if you're watching it from outside and you're thinking not just who's going to, you know, get a few more votes than next, but who is going to be our next Prime Minister, and you're looking at them, you're not going to be overwhelmingly impressed that there's a whole array of talent sitting in front of you.
But isn't it worse than
discussing
that?
it in a
Isn't
way.
it worse than that? I mean, a week ago...
I'm being nice about it.
No, I know you are. You've been quite loyal to the party in a way.
I am, because I remain a Conservative and I'm loyal to the party. And actually what I want them to do is just get on with this awful business, because I think it is pretty awful, get a selection out to the members, get somebody in place, and then stop all the argument and get back together.
So do you think it was a mistake for Boris to go?
I thought that it was getting on to being inevitable. I don't think, again, that it was particularly the best way of doing it. And frankly, it was quite extraordinary. You know, every sort of 10 minutes, it seemed, yet another minister resigned. And if you have a process which says 50-odd ministers have got to resign in order for you to be able to change the leader of the party, that doesn't quite look right either. Nothing looks
but then again,
right.
the way Mrs Thatcher went didn't look right. It probably never looks right, does it?
No, I suppose not. And the Conservative Party's always been quite good at getting on with assassination, where it sees it, essential to be.
Better than Labour.
Yeah.
who often duck it. Angela, I mean, these aren't even household names, most of them.
No, well, Rishi Sunak has become a household name, and I think has been rated quite well, looked at from outside. I mean, tax is immensely important. I mean, what we'd all like to do is pay no tax and have all the services that we want. Logic says you can't have that. Everybody accepts that we've just gone and spent a lot of money. And so having a sort of sensible, pragmatic way forward, it says this is the plan that's going to get us from A to B, and then we can do C and D, is kind of what is required. And an argument which says tax cuts now, yes, no, doesn't seem to be particularly edifying. And I have to say, Nigel, that if they did cut taxes right now, you've only got to look to see what's been happening to the pound against the dollar over this last period of time, a short period of time, and you can see that the pound will go down further against the dollar. What does that mean to you and me and everybody? It means your imports are going to get more expensive.
And inflation goes higher. I get it. And one of the reasons the pound's going down, and one of the reasons the euro too is going down, and the dollar is so strong, is they are self-sufficient in energy. And you and I have discussed this before, and we're at one on this particular point, that we should be self-sufficient. How is it, with such a vital national strategic debate as self-sufficiency, with the threat? I mean, rationing is now being openly talked about across the whole of the rest of Europe and here too.
Germany's got its plans in place. I mean, Germany's saying if Nord Stream 1, which is, of course, the big pipeline, gas pipeline to Russia, doesn't reopen after it's shut down for maintenance or whatever was the reason for it, they're going to have to start turning off not just people but industry. And I heard the German discussions on this, and it's just an extreme example of how Europe's got itself into a mess.
We had 2 TV debates
and they haven't touched it.
No mention of this.
Although today, of course, what has been published is a rather dense consultation document called, the energy market or electricity market reform, and it's a long document. I think I've got through about a third of it, and certainly.
And it's your subject.
And it's my subject, and I've sort of skipped to the bits that I was looking for. Has it actually grasped the problems with the existing electricity market? Yes. Has it got some propositions for a way forward? Yes, it has. And what the way forward in this context means is that you sort out some of the problems which result in the wholesale market being so high, which is within our own control. But it's all going to take time. And actually, Nigel, I think you're right to say, why aren't they talking about it? That should have been. These are a key topic that should have not just been argued about policy 10 years ago, but should have been operationalised. But is it that
they're all committed to net zero? You see, Kemi Badenoch appeared to question net zero, but then seemed to row back a little bit on it.
Yes, I think she did. In fact, I think she's been a very impressive performer. I mean, she's. Do I dare say that?
Would you vote for her?
I was going to say, do I dare say that I don't think she's going to make it this time? But I think we've seen a prime minister and a leader in the making there. And a thinker. And I can't remember the exact words she said about net zero, but she did say something to the effect that you can't just have a policy without working out how to get there. And of course that has been, let's make a net zero policy, or let's not have any more petrol cars or diesel cars or whatever. But actually this is a scientific engineering, expensive, detailed, long drawn out process of how you re-engineer our gas and our electricity markets. And we need to get on with it.
Angela,
we really need to get on with it.
As a loyal Conservative, former minister, can I ask you, do you see any prospect of the next Conservative leader grasping the energy nettle?
I think I do, not least because there's going to be a whole load of us sort of saying, you must do it, you must do it, you must do it. I doubt that many of them, if any of them, have actually been absolutely up close and personal with what it is that they've got to do, why we are not energy sufficient, how we become energy sufficient, how we build our new nuclears. I mean, I can bang on like this forever, and I do apologise on that. But it has now become it's the poster child for the cost of living crisis.
Okay.
And because it is, then I do think that now it will actually get the attention that it deserves.
I hope you're right, because it needs to, Angela.
I'll keep on trying.
I'm sure you will. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Now, the other subject that doesn't get a look in because it's much too difficult and can't be allowed at discussions at Notting Hill dinner parties is, of course, immigration, illegal immigration, or, God forbid, any discussion about ECHR, which, of course, all decent-minded, proper, nice, lovely people that live in £4 million houses in central London agree that the ECHR is marvellous. But there are some people out there, they may well be online readers of the Daily Express. It's quite possible, David Maddox, the political editor, is it not, who don't quite take that view. I want to come on to the Channel crisis in particular and immigration numbers, but just firstly, you are been a very strong Conservative and Brexit supporting newspaper, a very strong Boris Johnson supporting newspaper, but what's done is done, and I have to say, I think many will now think, what a pity he couldn't just tell the truth. He would have wiped the floor with that lot last night in debate, I think, don't you?
Well, I wouldn't rule out a comeback at some point. I have to say. Yeah. A couple of years' time, you watch.
I'm not so sure about that.
It depends if he stays in the MP.
I think he'll be on the American after dinner speaking circuit, but who's to say? What we're facing is what we're facing now. It's pretty unedifying stuff, David.
It's been quite depressing in places, actually, and to be frank, I'm not at all surprised that Sunak has come out as a clear leader, because if you look at those two televised debates, he's the only one who really looked like a Prime Minister.
That's exactly what I said. I said that at the start of the programme. He actually looks like a Prime Minister.
He looks like a Prime Minister. He sounds like a Prime Minister. I think the kind of attempts to suggest he's not a real Brexiteer have been a bit fake. And
he didn't publicly campaign for it. I didn't see him anywhere.
He didn't, but the man put his career on the line for it. First time I met Rishi was in Portcullis House. We had a cup of tea, and an hour before, David Cameron, he was telling me this, David Cameron had called him to come over to Downing Street to sign the Remain pledge that so many of them did, even though some of them said they were Leave supporters before. And he'd said, there's no point me coming over because I back Leave. And, you know, I respect somebody who does that.
He voted Leave. He's as a Chancellor trying to make us a very European-style economy.
Well, indeed. But the other thing I'd say about that, I wonder if he wasn't very visible because of the Vote Leave operation. If you remember then, they were trying to narrow it down to really a very small number of people at the front.
The Vote Leave operation was just a handful of people in the middle. It was all about Boris and Michael Gove. And the camp that I was in welcomed people from the Labour Party and all over. It was a very different campaign. David, who's going to win?
Well, Rishi's clearly going to the final two. I've got a feeling Liz Truss is in trouble. She's only picked up 7 of the Brexiteer votes. She was anointed. I've just been writing this. She was anointed by the ERG, 27 hardcore Brexiteer votes, and she picked up 7 of them. I think Penny will be breathing a sigh of relief that she only lost 1 vote. But the interesting thing, I think, in the next 24 hours is what happens with Kemi Badenoch support. Are some of us Truss supporters now thinking she can't do it, she can't get over the line, maybe we should support Kemi?
Do you know what? I would be over the moon if that happened. I'd love to see it, even if she hasn't got any experience. I just don't believe that the Conservative Party have got the courage to do it, but let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. The members probably have.
Absolutely, yes.
David, immigration, it's barely been on it's barely registered on the radar. Then no one's discussing it. Kemi Badenoch has, Suella Braverman before that did, and I did say, you know, I thought Braverman was setting the right agenda, but I knew she wouldn't get through. They are incapable of discussing the fact that legal immigration, is going to go to all-time highs. Incapable of discussing the fact the asylum backlog is now 125,000. Do you hear that at home? 125,000. Again in the English Channel today, another 6 boats crossed the English Channel today, another, I don't know what it'll be, 240 or whatever it is, a couple of hundred come pretty much every day when the weather's reasonable. Now, that's not as bad as it could have been, and There was a sort of report out by a few MPs today saying that nothing that had been done with Rwanda or the National Crime Agency would make a difference. Actually, I think credit where it's due. I think the National Crime Agency, that big arrest of 39 operatives, hundreds of boats and engines, I think these numbers would have been a lot higher.
No, I agree, and I think the Rwanda...
They're still terrible.
They're still bad, but and I think the Rwanda thing would have worked had it not been for the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. And of course there was only one candidate who had the courage to take that on, and that was Suella Braverman, and shock horror, she was kept out of the later stages
so
of the race.
Where is Kemi Badenoch on this? I'm not quite sure where she is.
Well, I'm not sure at all. I mean, she's been brave on a couple of issues. So you mentioned the net zero. Obviously, she and Penny Mordaunt have that spat over the trans stuff, but she hasn't really spoken out on the ECHR side of things. None of them have.
None of the others are going to do it, are they?
But it doesn't help, does it? That the two channels which hosted the debates are essentially woke channels. I mean, sorry to, I love the people at ITV and Channel 4, lovely people, but they have a left. They have a, well,
I haven't always been convinced that Channel 4. But there we are.
But they have a left-wing agenda. Yeah. They don't have. That debate should have actually taken place here on GB News, where actually the concerns of Conservatives, actual Conservative members and voters, would have actually been put to them, because it wasn't just the channel crisis that wasn't put to them, it was the whole issue of bankrupting people and net zero and all the rest of it.
Look at the audience. I mean, ITV chose, and I thought Judy Etchingham did pretty well with them, and she's good. She's good.
Yeah.
But I thought Channel 4, that audience, were they ordinary Conservative voters?
Well, I mean, there were supposed to be people thinking about being Conservative voters. I'd be surprised if any of them were.
It didn't look like it to me. So why won't they discuss this stuff? What are they scared of? Don't they realise that polling Professor Matthew Goodwin was putting out earlier on the show, showing you that out in the country there are millions of people with simple, straightforward views on what it is to be British, what it means about coming into this country illegally. What are they scared of, David? What have I missed in all these years? Why can't we discuss these things?
Well, I think you have a point about the polite dinner parties, and and of course, the circles these people move in. I mean, none of these people actually have constituencies which are really affected by these issues. I mean, Kemi, for all her sort of positives, is in Saffron Walden. Yeah, quite. I mean, the only one who potentially does is actually Penny Mordaunt down in Portsmouth, where I actually used to be political editor many years ago. And certainly, I can tell you, actually, people in Portsmouth think like that, but they're worried about immigration issues and issues like that.
Nothing's going to change, David, is it? Whoever wins, and it's going to be Rishi versus somebody. It could be Kemi, I doubt it, but and I still think Truss will probably do it, but I may be wrong. Who knows?
Well, like you, I lost my money on Zahawi.
Oh, great! I'm delighted.
I'm in the Zahawi.
As the end of the show approaches, I'm feeling so much better about that.
That was 2 months ago, and I realised I'd lost it as soon as he failed to resign when he went in and took the Chancellor's job. But I'm not putting money on again, but I would bet now on a Rishi. A Penny runoff. I don't think Liz Truss has done enough.
No, you may be right, but whichever it is, none of those three will address these issues, will they?
No.
Nothing changes.
They're all globalists in the end.
Are they going to lose the next election because of it?
Well, as I said to you last time when you asked me whether Boris would lose the next election, they're up against Keir Starmer, and I know that lots of Conservative MPs breathed a sigh of relief when Beergate went Starmer's way, because it meant that he didn't have to resign, and they're quite happy about that.
You see, all these double games. David Maddox, thank you again for coming in and joining us. Thank you to all of you for joining me for this 2-hour special. Back with you tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We'll get the next round. Let's see where we go. One thing's for certain. Nobody can accurately predict any of this, but now I will leave you in the capable hands of Dan Wootton.
Well, Nigel, what a show. I have been gripped for all of those 2 hours, and actually those results are fascinating. So the Tory leadership contest is in flux. The Mordaunt momentum is at an end. But will it be Truss or Badenoch who take on Fishy Rishi in that final two? All of the analysis throughout the night. My superstar panel are in: Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and John Sargent. Lionel Shriver is going to weigh in. But we're also covering the stories that the rest of the media isn't. Why is Gareth Southgate insisting England players need to be jabbed if they're going to go to the World Cup? Neil Oliver on that. And the Telford grooming scandal with Tom Slater. Huge show ahead, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's been a very hot start to the week and it's going to get even hotter. Tuesday marks the peak of this extremely hot spell. Red warning in force because these temperatures are unprecedented, record-breaking for the UK. And we're simply not adapted to this kind of heat, both by day and by night. The hot air extending across the whole of the country, which means that overnight temperatures won't dip very far at all. Even though there'll be clear spells for many, there'll be a few showers for the northwest of Scotland, some patchy cloud elsewhere, but otherwise clear skies and temperatures in some spots holding up in the mid-20s. And if that happens, it will be the warmest night on record. So we start off Tuesday already with temperatures in the 20s, and quite quickly with widespread sunny skies, those temperatures will shoot up. I think in some places by 10 a.m. we'll already be in the mid-30s of Celsius, and it's only going to get hotter. The heat intensifying across southeast Scotland into northeast England, central and eastern England, with temperatures widely here 38 to 40, perhaps 41 Celsius. Exceptionally high, unheard of temperatures. It is going to be cooler towards the southwest compared with Monday, and Northern Ireland also seeing lower temperatures. The air is starting to cool down. We're going to see that big change on Tuesday night as an area of showers moves through, and then those showers clearing the east for the start of Wednesday. Clear spells overnight, some wet weather pushing into western areas by the end of the night, but a more comfortable night for sleeping, although it won't be especially fresh. We're still looking at lows widely of 18 or 19 Celsius. A fine start for many on Wednesday, certainly a cooler start compared to recent mornings. Some showers around in the west first thing. Those will push east. And actually, it is another hot day in the east of England. Lincolnshire, East Anglia, 30 Celsius still possible. That could spark a few showers or thunderstorms by the afternoon. More typical weather for the UK on Thursday and Friday. Bright spells, showers, mid-20s at their highest.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.